Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for having me, particularly for Bruce for reaching out a few months ago and Eric just prior to that. So I've been looking forward to this conversation tonight, and that's what it will be. It's not death by PowerPoint, because I'm not a great believer in that. There are some salient things that we'll put up there ultimately for you to have a look at and for us to talk about. But I really encourage questions, and I hope there are a lot from the floor tonight, because they're a little different. We're not talking about cars, we're talking about aeroplanes, and certainly I think I can speak for most of us. We're all looking to for a fossil fuel-free future, and I'm certainly wanting to lead that charge in South Australia and hopefully Australia as we move forward. So, Eyre to There Aviation. The name's a bit of a mind bender. Eyre was an explorer. I was from the Eyre Peninsula. It sort of fits. So the name came from that. It may not ultimately be where we end up. So a little bit of history, I suppose, just moving forward. Who remembers those guys? Put your hand up. Okay. And certainly, you know, my point of view about that was, are we there yet? We're absolutely not. And that was in 1950 something. So obviously a cartoon, but believe me, the world is heading in that particular direction with urban mobility and concepts of you know, manned and unmanned drone flight and your Uber pickup from A to B. It is happening out there in the world at the moment. Last count, there are around about 400 or something prototypes and or production models of basically similar to the Jetsons thing, where you'll be picked up and dropped off, or you'll go from A to B by air. So it's pretty exciting time, and I'm hoping to live long enough to see it all, but we'll wait and see. And are we there yet? Well, no, we're not. But the electric plane there on the right-hand side is the one we have at Parafield. It's the ALPHA Electro. It's built in Slovenia. I was happy enough yesterday to take the Slovenian ambassador for a fly. So the relationship between the countries is certainly a good one. Slovenia, if you know much about it, Pipistrel was created in 1979 by Ivo Boscaral in a shed next to a paddock. In the old East Bloc days, before it was renamed, it was illegal to own an aircraft as a private individual. So most of the Pipistrel R&D was done at night time, as was the flying. And for those uninitiated, Pipistrel is actually a bat, or a breed of bat. So, so that's where basically the name Pipistrel comes from. So we go back to, you know, who really was first with electric planes, and you know, it's a bit like electric cars. We can argue about that all day long because we all still were, but it's pretty well historically documented that a couple of crazy Germans, I'm not going to can pronounce Fritz's name, but Heino is just going to have to stay as it is, and you guys can work it out. But it's a very difficult one for me. But essentially they did. They really came up with that good old German technology with Bosch, and came up with what we call in the industry a viable working passenger carrying electric aeroplane, albeit if you wanted to fly 12 minutes, that was great, because that's really the range that it had. But pretty exciting times. I mean, prior to that, not dissimilar to electric vehicles, you know, models and mock-ups and all sorts. They've been around for, God, the electric EVs, I think, the turn of the century. Yeah, so I mean, we're not, you know, the electric vehicle has certainly jumped a lot further than electric flight has, but beyond that, there were prototypes of electric tethered blimps, electric powered blimps that were basically, you know, had a plug going up to them from the ground. There have been prototypes of tethered helicopters, but the first real electric flight is actually that aircraft at the top. So what took 39 years? I actually don't know, but 39 years later, we've now got what we call the Pipistrel ALPHA Electro, which is the aircraft that we have, the company has in South Australia. And the ALPHA is a two-seat variation of one of Pipistrel's original, you know, petrol-powered aircraft. So it was really an easy transition to keep the same shell, the same design, the same aircraft, the same airframe, and ultimately blend it with basically what we have now is a 58 kilowatt electric motor. The wonderful thing about the electric plane is not dissimilar to cars, but probably even a little better, is that there are no moving parts. We've got basically direct drive to the propeller. The torque is instant, so your climb rate is almost vertical. It's a heck of a plane to fly. It's a lot of fun. So basically, that came out originally in 2012 as sort of the first you know, I wouldn't call it prototype, but it was branded as a sport aircraft by the European Union, and not a certified aeroplane as we would know it. So experimental, in other words. It took literally another few years, but I stopped doing that. Another few years to really get the regulators behind it, and we all know how hard they are to deal with at times. So the regulatory framework took approximately 15 years, I think, from conception beyond 2012. So in 2018 is when the aircraft that we have here arrived in Australia. It was used not very much over in WA, and we acquired it from those guys in February this year. Yeah, so it hasn't been in South Australia that long. And the purpose, and it's a great time to start an aviation company when COVID decides to shut you down again, but I speak for the rest of the planet when it comes to that. So anyway, so what do we use it for? We use it for the purposes of what we got into the business for. It's to demonstrate the capability and certainly the cost benefit of electric flight over fuel-powered flight, and it certainly is. It's got the European Safety Authority, as we see there, is a bit like our Civil Aviation Safety Authority. So they're the regulator. They determine the certification process for an aeroplane. It's a bit like having an ANCAP rating, I guess. If I can use metaphors, I think it's probably pretty close. It goes through a whole process before it's allowed to be flown in a particular category. We can go build a plane and fly it tomorrow, but the reality is if we want to sell that aeroplane into a production system, then obviously you need to have it certified. So luckily for Australia and our regulators, it's the one time I've seen them, and I've dealt with them for many years, it's the one time I've seen them actually take it on board and say, look, we can certify this for a specific use in Australia. So they did that straight away in 2018. It was absolutely brilliant. A couple of years later, the EASA, which is the European equivalent, certified the aeroplane ex-factory, or the aeroplanes built ex-factory, as basically capable of flying in a given environment for flight training or other purposes. So CASA has a habit, which is a good one, of basically climbing on the back of another country that has actually certified the aircraft. So we are very lucky that we now have an electric plane model being produced and factory built that actually will obtain Australian certification straight away. So it's a big bonus, and I'm really, really happy about that. So the issue there is, we can do, where are we, 90 knots at 170 odd Ks, we can fly that for 60 minutes, but where the hell do we go? I can't charge it when I get there. So really, that's a side issue that we're working with. So what's it really, really good for? It's good for flight training. It's really a brilliant aircraft for a student to get into at an airport, fly around in ever diminishing sort of rectangles and take off and land, take off and land. So that's its current sort of market, I suppose. The holy grail of electric going forward in terms of being competitively priced to our conventional planes is really comes back to logically a 4-seat aeroplane with a 2-hour range, and that's basically what Pipistrel are working on at the moment, and they've got that flying around, a prototype flying around America as we speak, and they've also got a hydrogen variant of this aircraft as well that they're playing with. So it's a great plane to fly, as Sue and I have had a couple of adventures in it. So we go back to that last statement about training. Why electric? And it's pretty logical to me, but anyway, cost of fuel or fuel period. So I gave a little graph there to give you an idea of basically, where does that aeroplane fit in the current Australian economic aviation climate? And we've just touched on it being flight training. So basically 25% of the aircraft used in Australia but for flight training are essentially that very beginning and ultimately all the way to advanced single or multi-engine, and ultimately leading a dedicated student to an airline pilot's licence. So there's another little niche there where you can do a lot of that training in that small plane before you progress to larger petrol-powered or turbine aircraft. And then we're graduating approximately 1,500 new airline captains per annum in this country in that group of flight schools. So the graph really speaks to basically how many flight schools there are in terms of that fleet So when you look at a market, so what is my market? Is it 5% or 10%? That 814 aircraft is spread over 74 flight schools. Now, if we go down to the bottom, why wouldn't you use electric? Obviously, we're saying there that, you know, if you're going to rebuild a petrol-powered aircraft after 2,000 hours of flight time, you're going to be looking at the cost of that rebuild. But you're going to be taking into account what you spent on fuel in that 2,000 hours as well. So to give you a really rough idea of the difference between a two-seat Cessna 150, if anybody knows what that is, put your hand up, but little two-seat trainer. Basically, if you looked at the 2,000 hours of the lifetime of that aircraft before you rebuilt the engine and the cost of the fuel you put in it, it's approximately $125,000 in expense. Okay, if you take the same configuration in electric, you're looking at approximately $44,000 to do your overhaul and change your batteries over and charge it up. So you're looking at about $81,000 saving over conventional technology. So go back to the graph and you see your flight schools there between 40 to 50 aircraft, or 40 on 45, whatever it might be. If you take somebody with a fleet of what I think I've said there, 15 aircraft, over the lifetime of that aircraft, they've saved $1.2 odd million in expense, fuel and maintenance and so on. So it's sort of from a flight school environment, it's a really big savings, particularly when you're looking at a Pipistrel being in the range of, you know, nearly $300,000. You're out there, you're buying 3 or 4 aircraft, literally, with your savings.
What's the comparative capital cost?
So the comparative capital cost for a conventional, call it a two-seat, what they call a diamond, or the DA40 is actually 4, but the nearest I can get to the Pipistrel in terms of conventional is around about 450,000 Australian dollars. Yep.
So
Whereas, yeah, no, so not us. That's the Pipistrel is just whoops, lost it. Did I turn it off? No, we're back. Oops, deglitched. Sorry, the Pipistrel landed in Australia for the two-seat version is just over 275,000 Australian. So you've got about 130 or 40,000 all up, including freight, of lower capital costs for the electric aircraft. So it's quite to start with, yeah.
So it's already cheaper.
It's already cheaper, yeah. So it's a lot of money when you really get down to needing a fleet. And you know, if you think Parafield, there's one company up there has 48 training planes. So it's, you know, when you think about that. So yeah, it's a lot of money that you're saving ultimately. So the business strategy, sorry, yes?
So obviously we will discuss all the numbers with us straight away, and the obvious question is why are there not more of them already? Is the supply able to meet the demand? Are people stuck in the past and stick with what they know, which is what we're finding with normal vehicles?
Yep. You're absolutely correct. There's two schools of thought. One is that your target market looks at an aeroplane acquisition for its $400,000 or $500,000 in a lifetime of that aeroplane. So there's a lot of resistance to change. We all know how difficult that was with electric, and certainly B, replacement of something that they would generally keep for a further decade or more. So that's really where the issues are. But I see this as like electric cars, will be right there, where ultimately, when I had the pleasure of driving a Nissan Leaf for probably a year or so when I was at Parafield, used to try and see if I can get back Parafield to Clarence Gardens, energy neutral. Never worked. I won't try it with the plane. But the point was, it was a lot of fun to drive. Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, you said that you could only fly it for an hour and then you couldn't get back because you couldn't charge it. There's a picture of a charger. What's the problem with the charging? Is that like a car charger?
The charger for this aeroplane, I mean, that's a fixed point at something that someone's put in their building, but the charger itself, the unit, actually weighs just under 75 kilos. So it's quite a bulky little piece of equipment. So you can't throw it in the plane and take it with you. It's way too big.
So you have to have a charger for that plane at every destination.
That's correct, yeah, and I'll touch on that in a minute as we move forward.
Yes. Carry on.
Yep, sorry. That's all right. Well, I can talk about it now. So the goal for Air to There Aviation really, and we're going to attempt to do this probably in January now, is to break the world record for not the longest flight in the plane, because we know that's about an hour, But the record for the longest distance in a condensed time frame. And there's two reasons for that. The Germans just did it, so that bugged me. They did 650 k's 750 k's a few weeks ago between Zurich and Germany. So we thought, well, we can't fly to Melbourne, we can't go anywhere else. Logistically, we can do whatever we want. We've got another aeroplane tagging along, or a ute with a trailer and a genset and things. So that's the logistics that we're working through at the moment. But I thought, we've got the opportunity, whilst I'm not using COVID as an opportunity, but we have the opportunity to prove to our governments, and certainly to regional aviation and to the end user, that you can actually go somewhere with one of these aeroplanes if the facilities are there to meet you at different airports. So, yes, sir.
Have you had any discussions with Phil Gell?
Sure have. Yep, know Phil quite well. Yep.
As we all do.
Yeah, you sure do. Yeah, Phil, before Bob passed, but Phil put the charging stations in the Parafield for me a couple of years back. And he's also fixed up our plug for our electric plane at some point. I lost my train of thought. So basically, the concept of doing a long distance flight and managing the logistics in terms of, having to have another aeroplane tagging along. We think, the route is basically here to Ceduna via the Eyre Peninsula and then up the coast. If you look at a map, there are not too many round circles on your nav chart there, so you've got to put it down somewhere. So what we're planning to do is basically have an accompanying aircraft take our charger to where we know we can plug it into three-phase at an airport. Think Lincoln or Ceduna or Port Pirie or whatever. Where we know we can't, we'll have a backup vehicle with a genset on the back. It takes about an hour and 20 minutes to charge it, so it's not too long. If we plan it right, the vehicle should always be ahead of us, so that's the ultimate aim. Now, it sounds a little tedious, but it's the way it's got to be done. So.
Just had a thought, was that record, German record at Zurich to Germany,
Yep.
they would have got all of the arts. They would have had a lot of firmers going up, and that, I think it was...
They had a lot of valleys to go through too. Yeah, and they were followed by about 50 Teslas, by the way. I'm just letting you know. So everybody wants to tag along on this trip, I'll be letting you know when it's happening. So, but yeah, you're right. There was a lot of altitude. I think the maximum they got to was 9,500 feet. It was and the longest distance they flew on any given leg of that was actually only 56 kilometres. But you obviously know the area and the country, and there's an airport every friggin' 10 minutes up the road. So. They're very well organised. So they picked a route where they knew they didn't have to have basically support beyond somebody carrying the charger in a vehicle and following them along. So, but we're going to break that, so I'm not talking about them anymore, because they're done. They're history. All right, let's get back to that. Who are we? Anyway, I thought I'd just throw a bit out there in terms of who's there to there, because we're all staring at this bloke going, never heard of you before, don't know what you do, where are you from? I actually love disruptive technology. I started my career in upsetting people. And myself and some mates, when we were pretty much fresh out of, or still at uni actually, when I was studying, but we built a 40-tonne robot that ultimately, in Queensland, that was able to dig, and I won't get into building, but able to dig a vertical trench and then track longitudinally and horizontally through the soil and build a basement. And at the same time, it could place concrete. So that was a pretty interesting thing to do, which we then sold to Caterpillar in the United States. So I went there for a year with Cat to try and get the business going. We decided to become our own contractor and our own end user of our prototypical products, which is fairly typical. I think I stayed 10 years in the end, but it was a fairly long time. So yeah, it was a very interesting thing, but I got out of that business and bought, probably stupidly, but I'm not sure, a helicopter dealership in California. I thought, this is a bit of fun, and I'll do this for a while. So I did that, and the rest of it's pretty much, I won't keep talking about it, but yeah, just a lot of fun doing aviation stuff. And I guess the real reason for pushing electric in my mind, in my own business sense, was managing Parafield Airport for 18 months. I didn't manage the airport. What I managed were numerous daily incessant noise complaints from neighbours and from locals, from the community. And I get that. I think what I don't get is unscrupulous developers and greedy councils and greedy airport owners that basically let things come together too close to where you're actually under a flight path. However, that's the way it is. So there was a motivation after many disruptive breakfasts and dinners with Sue and I from angry people saying my aeroplane has kept them away. I didn't have an aeroplane up there, but the airport's always going to be at fault, literally, for what it allows to happen on that bit of black stuff that they manage. So same as a racetrack, same as the footy field. Yeah, there's one in every crowd. And my view of managing it was to really take the noise complaints head on and deal with people directly rather than refer them to a 1-800 number and, you know, do your best. You guys know what I mean. And I found that really interesting and quite liberating. And we at the time were looking at Parafield as potentially being a model airport to introduce electric aircraft technology as a company. That didn't pan out, so I left and Sue and I went to Europe and we met with Pipistrel ultimately there, and a few handshakes later and a few emails came home with essentially the rights to assemble the Pipistrel aircraft in Australia at a future point. So that's really where it's at. The rest you've seen. I thought I'd just introduce you to... Hello, what have I done here? Got a glitch there. No, point it that way. Not working. Typical. Oh, there we go. All right. So the purpose of this brief introduction to the rest of the company is basically, from a business point of view, and my experience is you need to succeed. You don't need a lot of money all the time. You need a lot of good people. A lot of people that you have come across in walks of life that ultimately have to share the same interest, but have completely different skill sets. So just very briefly, so Jürgen Riepert up the top there. Jürgen's been on our board now for about a year or so. He works for the federal, the state government. It took probably 12 months for him to get permission to be on a non-paying, non-binding advisory board position, as he was head of our aviation policy for the South Australian government. So that was a bit tricky, which now has been disbanded. So he's a great asset to have. He knows the stuff I don't know about airspace regulations and air traffic control and things like that. So the purpose of this introduction to the rest of the team was really to show you that you really need to get those people, because I can't answer all the questions all the time. Catherine Conway, some of you may have heard of Catherine. She's an OAM. She started actually a company with Simon Hackett, which became Internode. So you've all met Simon. And she actually flies the aeroplane on my behalf fairly frequently, and we just recently did a joint venture where we put the aircraft into her training company that we will ultimately, we're heading down the path. If we can't get into Melbourne anytime soon, we're going to start flight training with electric aircraft in Parafield. So that's the news there. So yeah, a lot of experience and hell of a pilot, I must say. So that's Catherine. Les Shern, basically Les is fairly diverse, but his background really he works at Lot 14, so one of his key things is defence capability and certainly getting into the defence. I mean, the Air Force needs some of these things, I hope, one day. So his background really is about manufacturing, and when we get to that manufacturing point, he's more of a networker, I suppose, to get us into environments where we might get interest from an OEM that's making car parts could actually expand their operation to be putting planes together. So that's really the thing there. Steph Bolt. Steph's actually a highly degreed environment manager with a couple of degrees, and I can't remember what she's got. But she was also head of environment at Adelaide Airport. So she was the one that really got them their carbon neutral accreditation a couple of years back. So really, really good to know, and she's sort of semi-retired. And so when it comes to compliance and community engagement, things like that, she's my go-to person for that. So that's sort of the team, I guess. It's not just me up here alone doing this. Feels like it sometimes. So go back to what are we going to do? All right, so we went to Europe. The original deal for Pipistrel, it was just really to allow the establishment of an assembly network. So I had a few meetings when we got back with various manufacturers about how do we do this. And as I said earlier, some of those key manufacturers, including Greg McGarvey for that matter, we've already chatted about how we can connect and how we could combine the assembly of aircraft as well as the assembly of the, what I call as flat pack cars, or as he calls them, but the ACE cargo. And so there's a way to do it. So what do we get for it? We get a bang for our buck, and what do we get? So basically, in fact, you said, all right, if you go ahead and do this deal, these are all the things that they will do. So what that's demonstrating really is just the support, the ultimate support for the business in Australia coming from Slovenia, and ultimately that support goes beyond the Pipistrel. It goes right to the core of the Slovenian government, and those government guys there are pretty proactive. They're not like ours that get on a cause and then wander off and get dumped or re-elected, or not re-elected for that matter. So there's a lot of support, factory-wise and government-wise, and incentives to make things happen through their government. And as I said, I hosted the Slovenian ambassador yesterday and had that kind of a conversation with him about, who I need him to be talking to when he's sitting down with Stephen Marshall today. So that sort of stuff. And as you know, it's always political. It's never easy. So that's really what that is. It's just really a whole turnkey assembly facility. And I say assembly, we're not building aeroplanes in Australia. We're assembling a manufactured product that's been shipped here in 1,000 parts, basically, and that's a significant difference to that. But it looks something like that at the end of the day. That's not ours, but that's certainly Pipistrel. But that's ultimately the setup. Now, an aeroplane from full, basically it's full parts component to assembly is approximately 15 hours. So it's pretty quick, and then it's out to test flight. And the thing that some of my contacts have been struggling with is I need a factory at an airport, and the answer is absolutely not. I just need an airport to test fly the thing and put the wings on it. It takes 20 minutes to put the wings on these things. So you put it on a car trailer, and so that's it. And that was the last slide. So what's the future? The future of, I think electric flight is really promising. Australia's got some really, really good things going on. We've been test flying a company called Magnix, which is in Queensland. They've developed an electric power plant that's essentially been fitted to a Cessna Caravan. So we're now talking about a 10-seat aeroplane and the capability of that. We've got a company called Aviation in Israel. They have a 10-seat electric passenger plane as well. Well, they did until they burnt it. Anyway, that's another story. So the future is just moving. It's really moving very quickly. And as I said, there are just on 400 odd prototypical, urban vertical takeoff electric or hybrid aircraft, in development as we speak. So it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time for the car industry as well. So we need to just bring them together a little bit. Otherwise, happy to take some questions.
Any helicopters?
Sorry?
Any helicopters?
Not yet. I'd love one, but no. No, I've had enough of them. But no electric helicopters yet. But that's something that's been, when we say that, not helicopter as such, but certainly if you think of, your little drone with your, so we're looking at large-scale versions of that are currently being developed. Yep. That's it.
What's the grants future look like?
I really haven't drilled into it lately. Just starting that process now. It's like anything, I guess. You've just got to, depends who you know, isn't it? And I think we're going down the path of what do we need grants for. The first grant I'll be looking for from our state government is actually to do a scoping study on what it costs to put electric charging facilities at a bunch of airports. So this trip we're doing is really about that as well. I think there's an appetite there. I think our energy minister is pretty keen. So look, at the end of the day, have you had him speaking here yet? The energy minister?
No, they opened our electric car so we have a lot to do with that.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, apparently I haven't met him, but apparently it's really, really good to deal with. So that's really the idea of doing that trip, is just to where can we fly, how far can we fly, what's logical or within range, and then obviously we can try and get infrastructure put there as time goes. So, yep.
Is there any move to standardise the battery packs in all these different prototypes that are coming out, so that they only need one charger that can be on site, rather than having to transport a charger for Pipistrel, to have something that will charge everything, which is made in that, basically flying
You know, he's just pushed all my buttons in. The answer is no, flat no, and I'll tell you why. And it's a fairly simple answer that for me to plug, let's go back to the aeroplane. And I'm sorry I didn't put any pretty pictures of its innards in there, but basically that charging system, because of the way Europe works, is proprietary to the aircraft. And the reason for that is actually, like most cars are, there's one computer talking to another. So for Pipistrel or any manufacturer to standardise it, there needs to be a new standard, which is currently in development, so that the ultimate goal is, yes, there will be, I'd like to think that the charger becomes briefcase size and I can take it in the front seat and we can go somewhere. Ideally, you would have basically the ability to charge any form of electric aircraft anywhere it is, with the same kind of system as we do now with fuel systems and things like that. But it's going to take a bit of time and a bit of lobbying. Yeah.
So, the first question I was going to ask, but I asked the second one first. Have you considered trying to combine this with the Darwin to Adelaide solar challenge? Because it's a nice fit, and it would get some pretty bit of public interest.
Yeah, we've had some interest already, and yeah, we might talk to the boys again at some point. We did actually join the Darwin to Adelaide last leg of the 100-year centenary of the flight from England, but we only went from here to Waldinga, but that was far enough. But yeah, so there's a lot of things that we can do. We're working with a company at the moment, not working with, but talking to a company at the moment who's building basically a drone-based racing machine that once it gets racing, we may very well be have a chance to be the pace plane. So there's lots of fun stuff coming up as well. Yeah. Yes.
Size of the battery pack, the rate of charge, and what kind of charger are you using?
Yeah, well, it's a Pipistrel charger, so it's really, I've never even opened the cover. I've never looked inside it, but it's basically built in the factory. It's all secret squirrel stuff, and without the computer dongle, I couldn't even tell you how the thing works. But it weighs 75 kilos. The battery packs in the aircraft are 35 kilos each, and there are two of them. So they're basically the size of a couple of briefcases put together. So 24 each, or 26 each. Yeah.
So 52?
Yeah, 50 or 58 kilowatt output total. Yeah.
Okay, that's significant.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And you say it only takes an hour or so to
Yeah, yeah, it's debatable. Depends time and temperature.
20%?
Yeah, we'll take it down to 30%. We've had it lower. Anyway, that doesn't leave the room. But we'll anyway, Sue was in it, I wasn't. And the beach was looking good, apparently. But yeah, you don't want to do that too often. You were basically, you're starting at 100%, or generally 98, 97, 98. To get that, it really depends what you're doing with the aeroplane. If you're doing circuits, you're using max power every time you take off. So that's going to burn 10% for every takeoff. So if you're doing straight flying, obviously you get that back. There is the ability to basically regenerate, which I don't advocate, which is basically just a steep glide and some windmilling.
Works very well with cars.
Yeah, it worked pretty well with the little Nissan Leaf, but I don't advocate it for flight training students at all. So,
So
yeah.
what's the range, like just on a standard flight, without extraordinary headwinds or whatever, what range?
Yeah, around about 140 k's.
Okay, so
yeah.
you need them fairly close together.
Yeah, it's not.
When you talked about being able to plug in, it's not just three-phase power, you need this specific charger.
Yeah, and that you need that wherever you're going, or something that's ultimately going to be compatible with the aircraft. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but that's all to be done. I mean, it's early days for us. We've had this thing a year, not even that, 8 months.
It's the same with cars.
Yeah,
And AEVA
yeah.
and the Tesla Owners Club combined to put 32 amp three-phase
Yep.
at all the roadhouses around
Awesome.
Australia and through the Red Centre. That's why I was wondering if you could actually use that.
Yeah, look, we will eventually. I happen to know Mark Borlase pretty well as well, so from RAA, he's a friend of Sue's, so we're going to be having some conversations. Now, I think this poor gentleman's had his hand up for a while. I might, if you're okay. Yes.
What's the glide angle?
Glide angle. Do you really want to know? Yeah, it's about 1 in 25. So I mean, at the end of the day, you can go a long way.
That's not bad.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
You used to work down in Tassie with Trans-Aviation trucks.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
They've got the glide angle of route.
Yeah, 12,000 feet, 25 k's, give or take. So it's yeah. Now these do glide.
Stops, falls out.
It's also got a ballistic parachute, and I don't intend on trying either of those, but we'll wait and see. I'll just get to this gentleman here.
Yeah, what's the, two questions. One, what's the maximum occupancy and the weight restriction of
Yeah.
each person?
Yeah, two. So it's got a 560 maximum takeoff weight, a kilo max takeoff weight. The airplane gives you basically weight of two passengers no more than 90 kilos each. So it's about 360 plus a bit more. So yeah, so that's been marginal a couple of times too. But you're not 90 kilos per passenger and about 10 or so kilos of books and bags and things like that. So it's not a lot, not a lot. Yep.
There's this Czech company, name escapes me at all, you probably know them. They're building a charging network on all the airports in Czech Republic.
Right.
Called like the Tesla on Eyre.
Okay.
Logistically in Australia, obviously with the long distances, so
Yeah, that's the problem.
feasible. Well, sort of within Victoria, once they become a free country again, probably we could do that there.
Absolutely, that's the whole. Our original premise was to fly this to Melbourne, not Ceduna. The Czech guys, though, it's interesting that lots of people are building airplane chargers, but there were no electric airplanes, or there were very few. There are 39 of these things in the world at the moment that have been sold to end users. Most of them have a Tesla. So it's a bit like the cart before the horse. You need the planes literally before you need the charging infrastructure.
Well,
But you
they
really,
do planes as well.
yeah, but it's more light sport and things like that. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
have you also considered change all the battery packs? Which could then
Yes, and absolutely forbid it. Yeah, there's too much. There's too much wear and tear. I mean, by the time you basically disconnect it, the logistics of moving a 35 kilo battery a metre and a half off the ground onto some sort of a platform to put another one into it, you're running the risk of damaging your wiring, the changeover and all that sort of stuff. So I've actually advocated that we don't do that with this. It's just too hard. It's too hard in the field.
could you? If you do the tunneling robot, you can do the
I've already got my hands on the ability. The issue is you can't charge the battery out of the aeroplane. So what's the point? Yeah,
Oh, really?
that's the biggest drawback at the moment. It will not reach. I can't pull it out and plug it in. It's got to be in the aeroplane because it's basically talking to the aircraft. When you charge this aeroplane, the avionics are actually on, so you're looking at a screen both on the batteries and in the cockpit. So look, there's obviously going to be some form of ability to do that, but right now it's not. Yeah. This gentleman over there, you probably forgot that question you were going to ask.
No, it's about
You answered it.
battery.
Okay, good. Put your hand back down.
I just wanted to ask what voltage the batteries you have.
Oh God, that's a hard one. I actually don't know. I'll be quite blunt with you. I know the kilowatt output, but the voltage is beyond me. Seriously, yeah. But I'll find out for you, and I'll let Eric and Bruce know. Any more questions? Yep.
You've identified a nice business model with the flying school. Has anyone else shown interest in a different field of using this plane?
Yeah, research has. Doing bird counts for an environment company comes to mind, where it's that low and slow and quiet. You don't scare the birds when you're trying to count the population. So the answer, that's really only one. There hasn't been a lot of interest other than private owners that basically just want to puddle around their own airfield, their local airfield. But I think we'll see that again. It's like having the only one is it's good and it's bad in a lot of ways, because I'd love to have a dozen out there flying around Australia, and then you've got some history behind you that you can demonstrate to the RAF or whomever about how good it is, and so that's all coming. It's early days, but yeah, I'd like to think in a year from now we've got a dozen flying around, and they're doing more than just flying around the circles in the airport. I mean, as it is, sorry, yeah.
Maybe they can do drop spraying for small farmers, or for smaller.
Yeah. Again, it comes back to, one passenger, you've got a very lightweight spray unit, and you basically the thing on the bottom, and you could do it. Yeah.
Could they get closer to bushfires because they're not affected by smoke?
Absolutely. Yeah. But again, it's not a place I want to go. So.
Is
Yes.
there anything other than finance that's withholding the building numbers for those aircraft?
Other than finance, no, not really. It's really just about market acceptance. And market acceptance rules basically everything that we do in terms of if the demand is there, then the finance is there, and I think
They
that's.
can actually supply. Say you
Oh,
got
yeah.
10 orders today, they can use them
Yep, absolutely. My biggest problem right now, until we get some replacements, is that if we do a battery, we've got two, so we can fly it with one redundant anyway, provided we're close enough. But the biggest issue we have, if we have a battery pack that fails and we need replacement batteries, we're looking at a 6-week downtime for the aircraft because we can't put them on a plane. And that's one of the things we're sort of dealing with at the moment. So you need to look at, you've got a fairly big spares inventory that you need to keep.
Pretty much irony in that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Airplane battery.
Yeah, I know. Can't put an airplane battery in an airplane. I know. It's yeah. Go figure. Anyway, yep. So
You started off talking about climate change, greenhouse gas emissions and so on. We have all our political parties at the present time assuming that the new normal will be like the old normal with respect to tourism, which means long distance air travel. What prospect do you see for electric long distance air travel giving rise to a continuation of tourism?
I see it as being something that's already in development. In fact, I know it is. So the BAE 146, which is essentially a 150-seat capable passenger plane. There is one that's been fitted actually at Cranfield University in the United Kingdom that ultimately its test trials are going pretty well. It's got four engines on it rather than two, and it's flying and doing what it's supposed to do and performing quite well. The trade-off is...
Sort of distance.
I haven't seen the distance of it, but it's certainly from a regional aircraft point of view, not a long distance over water at this point. Look, I don't know how long it'll take. You know, what did I say we were? 40 odd years between, the first one and the next one, or 38 years. So, but there are a lot of companies globally and big companies that are looking at all of the concepts of long distance flight. Let's face it, lithium batteries, and it's like your cars. You know, the weight is always going to kill it. Until we can get that weight down. I mean, as I said before, to me the holy grail of this as a small plane is probably 2 seats and 4 seats, 2-hour range. And the only way to do that is get those batteries down to half the weight and size that they currently are. And my other concern about that is how much we know how many within reason what the oil reserves are globally. How much lithium is there? That's the other side of it.
To be more in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that our friends in the west? Up north. Okay. And it can be recycled. Well, the batteries out of this, you take one out, you can power up a motorhome. So there is a reuse component in that. And these batteries are 35,000 each. I don't have to tell you guys, what batteries cost for machinery, but yeah, 35 grand. 17,500 each. So they're not cheap. But your resale on that's around about 30%. So it's pretty good, But yeah, the future is all about looking at other alternate... I think hydrogen is going to be the ultimate solution for long distance air travel rather than lithium. I think that's really what a lot of people are working on at the moment. Yeah.
Storage.
Yes. Yeah, storage. Yep. And the concept of it not being a bomb. Yep.
You mentioned that someone has developed a 10-seater
Yep.
electric aircraft.
Yep.
What sort of range like that would that be suitable for?
Yeah, small commuter range.
Local tourists,
500 k's. Yeah.
sightseeing type tourism?
Yeah, around about 500 kilometres. Yeah.
Perfect.
So that's always both. There's Aviation. Unfortunately, their aeroplane, which I love, is a carbon composite aircraft, 10 seats. Caught fire on the ground in California last year because basically the battery, not the plane didn't, but the charger caught fire and destroyed the aeroplane. So that's why you don't leave your charger in overnight.
If you ask for a show of hands about smoke and batteries
Yeah.
in this room.
Yeah. I reckon how many have had an unpleasant experience? Yeah. Yeah, you don't leave it in, unplug it in and walk it away, or walk away. That's the trick. But yeah, the answer to that question is there is so much development in that sort of small commuter airplane space at the moment that I think within 5 years we're going to see it becoming, fairly prevalent globally. And I think it'll be that short haul stuff that really makes it. I mean, Norway, for argument's sake, their aviation authority has been told literally that they want to electrify their regional route by the year 2035. It's not far away. And they started with one of these till they've...
And they leave the world with electric cars.
Yeah, but they flew it into a lake, so that doesn't count. They use the parachute. We know it works. Yes, sir.
What's your plane made from?
It's basically composite fibre and fiberglass, and then ultimately all the interior is actually carbon fibre. So it's very light. It's 360 kilos all up. So you know, and it's interesting to fly because there's no wing loading because there's no fuel in it. So it's as light as a feather. And of course, as you know, with electric cars, all the power's up front, and as soon as you hit that lever, it just wants to go. So it's fun to fly around because you can beat the other guys. Yep.
How much of a market would you have with the right marketing in the, like, as a market really in the sports space, like Red Bull Air Race, etc.?
Oh yeah, probably not a lot because again, it comes to range again. If it was just we want to try it out with this new thing we're talking at the moment with a company that I know, and we're going to see if we can have a play with just basically some time trials around the circuit. It comes back to endurance again. You know, that's the thing. And again, if you high power settings, you're just watching that battery meter just, you know, your state of charge just drops quite radically, fairly quickly. But yeah, look, I think it's early days. I think we're going to see some racing technology, aerial racing technology come out in the next year or so. It's quite mind blowing.
Especially considering that application, it's a one-seat application, so you can then substitute the weight of the passenger with the battery, which increases your range.
Yeah, yeah.
And you've already got the power and torque on hand. So
Absolutely, yeah.
light and powerful as well.
Yeah, it's all doable. Yeah, it's just a matter. Depends who's got the appetite for it. I think. Yeah, I do because it's kind of exciting, but I need to focus on essentially basically the aeroplane being the configuration it's in. But I totally agree with you that I think someone's going to pick it up and say, "Hang on a sec, let's check this out and see what we can do with it." You know, it should be fun. Yep.
Currently, Australian bloke who flies for Red Bull. You know what I mean?
Is that Matt? Who? That Matt? It wasn't Matt Hall? No.
Possibly, I
Yeah.
get his name though.
Yeah, I think it's Matt. Yeah.
The AMF, so
Yeah, it is Matt. Seeing him next Sunday or Sunday week. So, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, no, he does. He won too, didn't he, this year? I think. That's good. Yep.
Two things. Maybe you should talk to Twiggy Forrest. He's getting into the retail market now.
Is he? Yeah, he is. R.M. Williams. Is that right? Yeah.
The serious one is, what do you see as the future for manufacturing in Australia?
For aircraft, I think we're in a good place. Yeah, I think we're in a very good place. I mean, if you think about Magnix, if you Google Magnix, Magnix is a highly successful electric power plant for larger aircraft. That's made, developed, produced in Brisbane, and those guys are leading pretty much the electric aircraft, the larger electric aircraft development at the moment. We've got some really very, very clever people in this country who've put together electric systems, propulsion systems, and I think our future in Australia, I'm looking at South Australia particularly, is pretty bright for the production of either all or components of electric aircraft for the rest of the planet.
We've got a lot of empty buildings.
We have a lot of empty buildings.
And there's a lot of small planes used around the outback and mid-north. You know, I live down at Goolwa, and there are at least 3 airstrips down there.
Sure are, yeah.
Regular use, and so you know, I think there's a huge market for people who just want to sort of buzz about.
Oh, there is that, and there's also a market for those smaller aerodromes to get involved if they've got the ability to and the property to do it, to become small manufacturing hubs in their own right, where you need to test fly an aircraft. Goolwa comes to mind, so does Aldinga for that matter. Yeah, it's getting too expensive up north.
How much goes for aerobatics?
Yeah, it's not recommended. I mean, steep turns and again, you've got no wing loading, so that wing is empty. There is no fuel in it. Yeah, it's one of those flat batteries. I haven't seen one upside down yet intentionally, so at the end of the day, I think it's just a matter of it's not something I'm going to try. I look at the aircraft's rating and its vertical and horizontal speeds, and I go, no, I'm not going to try that. So ultimately, with a bit of strengthening, I think, yeah, absolutely, why not? Yep. People like noise. That's the problem when it comes to aerobatics. Noise and smoke. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Would you be involved with Airspeeder, who were looking at racing in the future, or is that...
Just a tiny bit. Yeah, well, we had a chat, we've met each other, and they were keen to come and see the power plant in the electric aircraft, and we've had a couple of chats about where there's some synergy between the two companies, maybe down the track. One of the things that I put to them recently was, once that program really gets going, which I know it will, is who's going to train those guys. So that's sort of what we're talking about, hopefully talking about at some point. Yeah.
And can I just ask then, if your dream does come true about reducing the weight of the batteries, then would you look at putting weight and technology more into aerobatics for the plane?
Absolutely, yeah. So then you've got more of a rounded aircraft for the public, and much more we don't have now is we've got a product that suits right now, a product that actually suits a particular market segment. That's what we have, unless you just want to fly for fun and not go anywhere. Yeah.
And then if you can have regeneration charging without having to total reliance on the charger, that would also...
Absolutely, yeah. One of the concepts we had was to try and get the factory to approve an engineering modification to the aeroplane to basically take a tow hook, so we could tow it with basically a glider tug. We can go anywhere we want then. So that's something that's actually being discussed at the moment. So we think about, I want to ferry this thing to Melbourne for a demonstration. Well, there's two ways of doing it. Take 3 days, which is ridiculous, or take the wings off, put it on a trailer, which is 7 or 8 hours, or tow it. So that's a concept that we're looking at. Because you can drop the tow thing off at a point, half an hour before your destination, away you go. And I've got a glider pilot that sort of flies this aeroplane that she's totally adamant that's what she wants to do. So anything's possible. Yeah. Oh.
Last question?
And the Americans behind the electric aircraft, who push the electric aircraft, are they going to be very much competitive?
Depends on your president. Are they behind it? I think America, the answer is, it's a difficult one to say. Look, they've had Pipistrel electric aircraft in the United States for nearly 6 years that have never flown in anything other than a bit of recreation, because the American regulator, which is the NTSB in this case, along with the FAA, don't know what to do. They're scratching their head in terms of, well, it's electric, what do we do? So you've got this situation happening where the certification process has actually been held up by a couple of guys I don't know personally, but I know the business. 18 months they've had their airplane in a hangar because they can't get the US government to certify it for its purpose. Is America in general behind electric aviation? Yeah, look, I think so. There's a couple of companies over there that come to mind who talk big and like to friend me on LinkedIn and things like that, but the reality is they haven't got a plane that's flying yet, but they're talking about having orders for hundreds of them. So I've got one that's flying with no orders, so do the math. So it's pretty simple. So at the end of the day, look, I think as the technology evolves, whether it's partly US made or partly not, I think we'll see them follow the lead, but they certainly are not in the lead at the moment. Yep.
Okay. Well,
Thank you all.
I would like you all to join me in thanking Barrie for a fascinating conversation.
Thanks very much.